right, we're rolling.
Awesome. All right. Think it hears us?
I'm pretty sure it's good.
Cool.
But yeah, so do you want to say your name, how we met, and a little about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Chris B. I met you basically over email, right? And then we just like met up and signed a lease and had an apartment together for a whole year before knowing that the atrocities of first year training at the conservatory would, make it kind of difficult to like live together. I don't even think it was like difficult. I think, I think eventually we were like on the same page as far as living together. Like you see somebody every day for like 8 hours a day and then you have to go and live with them. I think it makes challenging.
Like to be able to have to do the work that we were doing, which was like just emptying our souls and showing each other like the scariest parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, and then to go home and to, always be with like a person that you have never met before, working on this kind of like soul
opening.
Yeah, kind of process it's going to be rough on anyone.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I'm curious if do you have any like, I guess, questions about what it was like to, I don't know, what was it like? Well, I'm curious what.
Yeah.
Are you gonna do your own video for when you talk about what it was like for you? Because if we get into it too much now, then maybe it'll take away from that.
No, I do not plan to. I mean, the videos that I've done with like my reflections and stuff, those are the kind of videos that I don't think I'm gonna have like an in-depth video about my experience, but I will write stuff.
Yeah.
I've been writing things,
Right.
I don't know. I tend to find that. Oh yeah, that's okay. Luckily, the mic will probably pick up on some of these sounds, but it's pointed right at us.
Oh, okay. It's very directional.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess you said a little bit about myself. I'm from Long Beach, California. My parents are both immigrants. My mom's from Peru. My dad's from Poland. So I'm a first generation American, which you know, but they don't.
No, this is from.
Cool. I feel like all my life it was hard to fit in anywhere. I was actually talking to Liam the other night about this. We're having a couple margaritas, and I feel like my perception as a kid of what it's like to be an American or just, a kid growing up throughout the 90s and 2000s was like you have American culture in this bubble, and then you have like foreigners in this bubble, and then you have like this section in the middle where people sort of cross in and out of that. And I feel like that's where I've always lived. I've always been like not able to be fully accepted into either category because I'm not like fully foreign, you know what I mean? So I think all my life that was influenced the way I approach life, like I feel like I had to be a chameleon in order to be accepted places. Like my first language was Spanish, and I remember like I had this babysitter named Barbara Bennett, and the reason she was my babysitter was because when I was having my first birthday, my 1-year birthday, I was actually at the hospital on March 2nd, and or maybe it was March 8th, sorry, because that's when my friend Tyler's birthday is, and he had just been born. So that was like technically my first friend since I was a kid, and he was this, blonde guy with blue eyes. He's still around. He lives in Chicago with his family, Illinois. But anyway, yeah, like I guess like growing up and being babysat by this, very American woman who was, I don't know, like where her roots were. I imagine she might have been like, she maybe been from California her whole life, but she felt like she might have been like somewhat Southern, you know what I mean? and she was very like harsh and strict, and she watched like, you know, these old timey movies and read these like really corny romance novels, right, that like old ladies like. And she had like her friend Rosie come over, and they would play like Phase 10 or like whatever different bridge or whatever card games, and Rosie would smoke like a chimney. And yeah, man, it was just like, if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have had like a semblance of how to identify as an American, how to, you know, like I wouldn't have had that influence in my life. Had I been raised or babysat by like another Hispanic woman, I'd probably be more Hispanic, you know what I mean, like perceived. I don't know how to put it. But yeah, I mean, and I think that's what influenced me wanting to be an actor, is like my whole life never feeling like I fit in anywhere, and like having to code switch, you know, like I've always been able to mold myself to what kind of people need to see or experience in order to accept you into their lives, which I think is a survival mechanism. I was telling Liam the other night, I was like, survival mechanisms are like, if you can incorporate survival mechanisms into your acting, it's like the bread and butter. You know, so I think that's where I kind of ground my acting in, is, you know, survival.
Is using the tools that you have used throughout your whole life as survival mechanisms, and equipping that to these circumstances.
Yeah, and I mean, just kind of putting all the feeling of never feeling like I fit in, or like, you know, imagining like everything my parents had to go through for me to be where I am now is quintessential in my acting. Like I'm always like, every time I work on a role, like you have to go, I feel like you have to go to like the roots of your humanity, and I always start there, you know.
It's amazing. That's something that is so amazing about you. And like, I mean, if you like look into the camera, like people can see, just like the first time I met you, like just your open eyes and your smile, your grin that's like that's like a troublemaker, but also like very caring. You know. For you, are there situations where you feel like you don't need to be a chameleon? What are those circumstances that make you feel comfortable?
Well, you know, the chameleon is born a chameleon, right? Maybe I'm not actively thinking about being a chameleon, but I think it's always going on. Like, I'm a product of my environment. You know, I'm a product of the conditions I was raised in. I'm a product of the conditions my family went through throughout their lives. And then on top of that, like events that I've witnessed, and everybody is like this, you know, like it just depends like what you were exposed to. So to a certain extent, like I'm gonna be a chameleon regardless, because of all the different colors that I was formulated with, you know. So I mean, I guess to answer your question, like no, I'm not like thinking about it, but like probably there's like a tinge, like every time I interact with somebody different, is like something is shifted, but it's only like shifted to the extent that you would, you know, like mold a shape so that you could fit it into the right placeholder. You know what I mean? So that you can uphold whatever structure is there. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I guess like for you, where in your life do you find peace? I guess is something that I have always been really interested in knowing about you.
Oh yeah, that's definitely. It's funny because I actually recently wrote a song, and I said that like peace is like the hardest thing for me to find. Actually, I like to live in the chaos. You know, I mean, as much, and there's times where I don't like it, but yeah, I mean, I think peace is, for me, is like being able to work out, go for a swim right after I work out, like that feeling of like utter exhaustion that I've exerted myself 100%. I've fought, you know, tooth and nail against myself and every boundary that I'm facing in my life. There's a moment of like, all right, that's good. Like I could take a break now, you know?
Are there I know it's starting to feel a little cold here.
I'm not too cold actually.
Are there any stories about your life that you think about a lot that have brought you to this moment and who you are and how you identify as a person?
Yeah.
You're not getting away easy.
Got a lot of those.
Yeah.
We're gonna start the tears early today, are we? Alright, no. Yeah, there was, I mean, so many. Like, I think one of, it's probably between two. Like, it's definitely like a tie goes to the runner scenario. There's the number one was the moment I saw my parents fight, like physically. You know, like all my life, my parents were hard on me, you know, and they were hard on each other, and being from two completely separate, you know, cultural identities. Like I said, my mom's from Peru, my dad's from Poland. He grew up in communism. He had pretty much nothing his whole life. He was a fucking orphan since he was 8 years old. And my mom had a huge family. But she was the oldest of her family, and she always felt the need to like come out and move forward. But like, so I guess like they have very strong personalities, you know what I mean? And so that would clash. But anyways, at some point in their relationship, I think I was like 6.5, 7 years old. I think my dad cheated on my mom, you know, like there's no way to butter that up. And he admits it. He's like, well, you know, the reason I did it was because this person said that.
Split it.
Oh, that's okay, man.
Let's split it.
No, I'm getting used to it.
Whenever you want.
Thank you. That yeah, he was like, yeah, I mean, the reason I cheated on your mom is because she was already accusing me, and then this woman just presented herself in a way that she wanted to cheat on her husband anyway. So like I remember like specifically like at our apartment in Inglewood when like they had a fight. I think he like finally admitted, I don't know what the fight was really over. And like I just remember like them both yelling at each other and my mom crying and like, you know, her trying to like kick my dad away from her, and my dad just trying to like stop her from moving, and like I was like, I'm gonna call the cops if you guys don't stop. And I had the phone in my hand. That was, you know, and my mom basically like she was about to take off and like leave. Like she took off and left that day. And I already didn't have a good relationship with my dad. So I felt obviously abandoned, and I also felt like, you know, like didn't have much hope, and that like life would turn into my dad making, you know, whatever lunch he wanted to make me have. Like I wouldn't have my own life, you know. That's how I felt for a few weeks. And then I mean, obviously like this lasted a long amount of time. I don't think things ever necessarily normalized. I mean, until like I was an adult and I had like gone through all my phases of rebellion, and you know what I mean. And then the other also like really intense event that I think has formulated my perception of the world and how I perceive other human beings was like going to Auschwitz, like when I was the same age. Like this happened like literally, like I must have been like 6.5, and then 7.5 I went to Auschwitz. So, but like by that time at least my family was like trying to like be a family again, you know, like after several months of a lot of damage. And so seeing that and like breathing the air of the gas chambers and seeing the containers filled with people's belongings and nails and hair and dolls, I think, you know, my first thought of ending my life was when I was 7 years old. I remember it was like probably I think it was the morning of 9/11. Because we went to Auschwitz in the summer, and then 9/11 happened like 2-3 months later. And I just remember that morning, like I was just like not feeling good. I had no idea what was going on TV. And like I held a butter knife up to my neck. I was like, should I kill myself, Mom? Like, should I do it? Like, you know, like I was like genuinely curious about that. Like what would happen? Like what is the consequence? Because all of this seems inconsequential anyway. Yeah, and then I went and like I sat down to have my fucking chocolate milk with my Pop-Tart, and then I watched the fucking plane go into the tower, you know what I mean? So that's kind of, that pocket of time definitely molded the way I interact with our world. And I think a lot of our training and, well, my training besides coming to the, conservatory is centered around like in what ways do I interact with the world? How is it influenced by those events that I've had, and how do I become conscientious of the fact that when I interact with certain people, parts of my childhood trauma, I'm reenacting it, you know what I mean? Like and it might be completely subconscious, so like I have to be very conscious of when I speak to somebody, or like if I get upset, like these days, I really, things don't bother me so much anymore, like I feel like I've got to the point where, you were asking how do I find peace, like my friend Eric, who did 2 tours in Iraq, and I mean he's not my friend anymore really, kind of, we don't speak anymore. He had this motto which was, expect nothing but accept everything. And I think that's really sort of made it easy for me to just look at the world and be like, that's what it is, man. Like fucking, there's human trafficking. There's people getting their heads cut off because there's religious fanatics and extremists in the world. Like there's all this chaos and terrible things happening in the world. And you can't expect humans to not do that. And if you do, then you're gonna be in a world of pain and misery. And I think my whole life I expected, that, well, not my whole life, but like as a kid, like I expected maybe it would get easier, or like, like things will be all right, like there'll be a happy ending, like, I used to expect it. I don't expect anything anymore. I just kind of let it, watch it flow, do its thing, and it's a lot easier to live like that, because then, like I said, going back to the chameleon thing, like then I could shift. I'm very adaptable. Like now I'm not stuck in like my idea or conceptualization of how things ought to be. I see the way things are and then in turn I will respond,
Having that mindset, what is your relationship like to your dreams? Meaning like your hopes or your ambitions or...
Yeah, I mean, like, dude, my parents came to this country with nothing, and they saw a life for themselves, and they made it happen. So for me, it's like nothing is out of reach. Like anything that you can dream, anything that you can put your mind to is absolutely achievable. Even if it's the most unrealistic fucking dream, according to other people. Like, I remember one time I was in a Meisner class, I'm sorry for dropping your name, but I love you, on a Steers. I was in a Meisner class, and we were doing an exercise, and granted, I was probably doing bad acting at the time. But it's the exercise where you come into the room, and you have like something that you just came from. And then, like somebody in the room also has something that they're dealing with. So I come into the room, and my thing was like, I just won $400 million in the lottery, right?
Could you imagine?
I can't. I don't think anybody can. And so maybe she was right to say like that's not a realistic given circumstance. But to me, like that just means you have limited imagination. Like you have to imagine yourself. Like imagine if I was Jeff Bezos. Like you have to like put yourself in those shoes if you want that for yourself. I mean, which I don't want to be Jeff Bezos rich. I don't want to be Elon Musk rich. But I definitely want to be fucking well off, man.
So what are some things that you imagine that
I think number one is I see probably every week I literally stare at myself in the mirror and I say that this is gonna happen. I'm seeing it now. Is one day I will hold a fucking Oscar in my hand for Best Actor. And I will do everything in my power to get there. Like, there's no question in my mind that it will happen. Yeah. And, if I allow the possibility that it won't, then I've already taken away the power of that vision, you know? So that's what I dream about. Like, and actually it's funny, I told myself that probably like for a whole 30 minutes right before I did my showcasing, and I felt like that was the most loose I've ever been. So I think the more anybody like has a vision, the more you like really hone in on it and you fucking like craft it and like make it very specific, and then like you taste the emotions of being in that moment. It's real. Like it's existing and it's waiting for me to arrive.
Are there things I've talked on the channel a lot about habits and routines that, you know, we kind of get into to be able to arrive at where we imagine ourselves to be, you know, years from now, or hopefully a shorter period of time than
Right.
years, right? But are there some habits or routines that you will swear by, or that you find really resonate with you and in your process?
You know, habits are fucking hard, man. Habits are hard. I know you're good at getting a grip on those things. I'm not. But yeah, I mean, like, for me, it's like physical fitness, like I said, is like the way for me to find peace. So I have to work out at least 3 times a week. That's like a habit. I've enacted that habit for a year now, so I feel good about it. That did not used to be the case. It wasn't until I was like, 19 that I started my fitness journey. Like, I did sports in high school, but I was smoking a lot of weed. I was depressed because of my relationship with my parents and the world, and I wasn't like committed. And now I've been committed, and I feel good after a whole year. And I'm not where I want to be in that journey, but that's what habits are. It's like, it's the stepping stones, the what do you call it? The consistency that matters, right? So a new habit that, well, it's not even new. I've been trying to work on this habit since probably last year, or maybe even farther than that, is like getting adequate sleep. Sleep is like the most powerful drug that anybody could take. Like it's restorative. Like there's a number of like studies that show that your life expectancy will increase the more sleep you get. A number of psychological benefits. And right now I only get like 5.5 hours of sleep a night, and I'm aiming for like 7.5 or 8. And that's hard. Like, I mean,
What makes it difficult for you to get sleep?
well, right now is my environment. But secondary to that is my mind. Like I often, especially right before I fall asleep, I'm thinking about recent traumatic experiences that I've gone through, like, my relationship with an individual in our conservatory who I don't want to name drop or anything, but
It's probably best not to.
yeah. And if it happens, it's just it's all out of respect. Like that's the thing that happened. I'm not going to negate the fact that I've gone through an experience. And that's the hardest part too, is like when I feel like we should talk about this. This is like an important fucking thing that I haven't talked about with anybody, except for like you and like Liam and Chris Ayers. And yeah, I think that's the extent of it. It's like I've gone through an experience with somebody of like having an sort of an emotionally abusive relationship, and I think, I'm not saying I was the victim, or like I think we were both the victim in that situation. Like I think the individual I was with had like some past trauma, and they kind of projected it onto me throughout our relationship. And so I think about that every night before I went to bed. Like I recap all the things that I could have done better. I think about how nobody in our ensemble really acknowledges my experience with that, or like wants to hear it. And I see that shit. I'm looking at you. Yeah. You know who you are. If you're talking to me, you're talking to me. If you're not, you're not. But that's cool. And so like that's something that I can't. It's hard to sleep. And I've basically, I have an album now. It's ready, almost, I think. I need some music videos, and so like I listen to those songs every night before I go to bed, because it's like the only thing that'll like kind of make me feel like I've come to terms to some extent with that situation, you know? So that's why it's hard to fall asleep.
Well, oh my gosh, my legs are asleep. Talking about falling asleep, my
Right.
body falls asleep without me even wanting it to.
Yeah. You probably shouldn't have made a pretzel there.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. When, like, in terms of, like, you have, like, routines and habits that allow you to kind of access your dreams or your ambitions, your images of where you want to be, would have been some, other than...
Most of it's daydreaming. Like, if you have a dream, I think there's a lot of things that you can do that are practical and like within the reach of, you know, like obviously, like I came to a conservatory to get my master's degree, and I've gone through the rigmarole of those studies, and not that it's just, you know, rigmarole, not to write it off, it was important experiences. But I've, you know, gone through all of the processes that I need to align myself in a way to set myself up for the success that I envision for myself, you know? And I don't know that it's always day in, day out, like, per se, but like, yeah, like I daydream about characters that, you know, I work on, or I daydream about my life and what it would be like when I get to that point. I think, you know, maybe I should definitely do a lot more hands-on research stuff, like, you know, looking up agencies and stuff, but I don't know, like, there's so many things that you could do. I don't know, man. Right now, I feel like I'm just trying to focus on... It's hard, right? Like, you want to, like, have this life, but you also want to have the life in the moment. Like, and I try to live life in the moment as much as possible, and, like, when I'm not living life in the moment, it means I'm daydreaming about the past or the future.
How can you like live presently while also actively building a foundation for the future, right? Like that's,
yeah,
I think that's the,
it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, it's a juggling act. But maybe the act of the juggling is almost the thrill of this journey too.
Yeah, and kind of like juggling, I mean, I have a friend named Edgar Yukovich who he juggles like knives, you know, and I think at a certain point you get so good at the juggling act that it's kind of going on in the background. You know, like I'm not like I have an agent, like I'm not worried about, I'm not like, oh, like I need to submit myself for this and that. I have somebody doing that for me. You know, like there's certain things that like you can't like grab a hold of everything. You got to just like let those processes unfold for themselves.
Actually, that leads to a great question. What are the things that you think you have a hard time letting go of in terms of your own control in your life?
That's hard to say, man, because I feel like my life is absolutely out of control. I'm kidding. I think I can't like let go of the idea that like my body is not where I want it to be. And that's why I'm working on that Richard piece tonight, you know, and for that auditions. I just like want to like look, like I want to reach the pinnacle of whatever like the body image, the ideal body image of a man is. Like I want to look like that. I want to look like a Greek god. I want to look like Brad Pitt in Troy. Like that's who I want to be. You know what I mean? So to a certain extent, if I don't do those things, then I don't have control of my life. Like if I'm not like actively like reaching towards that, I don't have a grip on anything. Aside from that, like what else? What else do I have trouble letting go of? Letting go of control of? I don't know, man. I don't know that necessarily control is something I really care for. I don't know. Is it control? Like, is it a desire for control to like want to like have people reach out to you more often, or like want to be more integrated into whatever cultural systematic facets that exist? Like, you know, like I want to be a part of something, and I never feel like I am.
is a huge thing. I mean, this isn't something new that you do either. Like you've been vulnerable, and by putting yourself out there in this way, I think you act as a role model. I think for others who may be searching, may be looking for things, you may just want to listen.
Yeah. It's scary. I feel like that's a big responsibility. Because I want to be a role model for people. A lot, like, for sure. I think about, like, somebody who might have been, like, who is right now in the position that I was when I was, like, 18, 19 years old, doing a lot of drugs and like, had a vision for myself, but wasn't really, like, approaching it, like... And to a certain extent, like, that's still part of who I am, is, like, I'm not too attached to, like, where I want to go in life, because I feel like life has its own ebb and flow, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, it's like I'm on this wave, and, like, I am just like a fucking turtle, like a little sea turtle on this wave. And, like, the only, like, fucking influence I have over my whole life is how much I paddle this way so I can turn a little bit. So when I wind up on the fucking shore, I don't break my whole turtle, like, you know what I mean? My shell, like, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Well, could you, this is something that, I mean, if you feel comfortable talking about it, your relationship with drugs, and how that has kind of influenced your identity, or your motivation, or your dreams. Just wait until this. I don't know if these planes, I don't know if that gets caught on the mic.
Probably. That's pretty strong.
It's pretty loud.
Let's see. Well, I mean, I started smoking weed when I was like 14 years old. I haven't really stopped since. I mean, I think I took, like, the longest break I've ever taken was probably like 6 months. I was working on Merrily We Roll Along, a very intense Sondheim musical. A lot of music, like a lot of singing where you can't breathe, basically. Yeah, literally. And so, I mean, that's like the only time I've taken a break, but how has it influenced the way... Well, before it was like a way to escape. And, probably to a certain extent, it still is now sometimes. But, like, now, like, it used to be, like, a way to, like, fit in with my friends, like, there's a lot of things, like, it's a cultural thing, to a certain extent. Weed has its own culture, right? Drugs has its own culture. I've never done anything like heroin or speed or, like, anything, like, really fucking strong like that, like meth. I wouldn't touch that stuff. But I've done a lot of hallucinogens, LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, peyote in the form of a San Pedro cactus, which is, like, it's basically like MDMA. It's like the cousin to MDMA. What's the actual word for it? It's basically kind of like DMT, but, like, a longer... Yeah, and, like, well, I guess I could describe one of those experiences, because I think one of those was really revelatory. Something about when I took San Pedro cactus for the first time, which is basically like taking ayahuasca, or it's mescaline. That's what it's called, mescaline. I took mescaline, and I was with my friend Liam and my friend Johnny, and we were at the top of...
Was it Liam and Johnny from the conservatory?
I wish.
Could you imagine?
That would have been intense. No, it was
Johnny. Oh.
It was my friend Liam, Anchors Away, and my friend Johnny G. I won't say their whole names.
Yeah.
But, it's like this disgusting, like, well, let me tell you the process first. So you get a San Pedro cactus. You got to make sure it's the right cactus. If you eat the wrong cactus, you can poison yourself and get really sick. But you, like, take off all the fucking needles one by one, chop it all up into pieces, throw it in the blender, and then you throw it into a crock pot, cook it for like 4 hours, and then you take the masa, like this nasty mesh of all this cactus, throw it into a t-shirt, strain it, and it's a tea. And you drink this tea that makes you sick to your stomach. And supposedly, according to Native Americans, like, if you throw up the tea, then it means your spirit isn't ready to, accept this...
The experience.
Yeah. And, so anyways, I think this was my second time taking it, but this was the strongest dose that I had. And we're in San Pedro, California, at the top of, I mean, San Pedro is like, for people who don't have context, ooh, look at that caterpillar, it's really nice.
I don't even see him.
Right there. I want to pick him up and show him to the camera.
Oh,
It's all right. It's really nice. Anyways,
yeah.
there's this place called the Korean Bell, and San Pedro, for those who don't know, is basically at the edge of a cliff. Like, like there's a cliff, and you know they have like it's the ocean. And so, anyways, we're there, and there's this place called the Korean Bell, and it used to be a station for. In World War II, they had like a lot of turrets and stuff in case the enemy invaded. Anyways, we're there, and I just remember like starting to feel stuff was like the way it feels is like your skin. It's like you can't tell whether it's hot or cold. You're like, I don't know, am I hot? Am I cold? And it was windy, and it started to like, sort of rain a little bit. And I see like a rainbow. I'm like, oh, it's like because it's sunny and it's also raining. I'm like, oh look, there's a rainbow, guys. And they look, and then I like look this way, and there's like 50 rainbows. And I'm like, holy crap! And like all of a sudden, like the grass turned super vivid green, and like yeah, the sky was like purple. Like I felt like I was in Willy Wonka's Wonderland. All these rainbows, and then like I turn, and then all of a sudden the wind kicks up, and like the rain starts happening, and then I see like this face in the clouds, and it looks like it just like blows, and like all this air and rain starts coming down. I could have sworn I seen the face of Zeus. My friend Liam is like fucking staring into the sun. We're like, Liam, stop staring into the sun. It was intense, man. And so, I mean, I guess to make it a long story short, because I could go for hours about this journey. It was like a walk through heaven and hell. Like that was the heaven part of it. The hell part of it was when it became nighttime. And I enjoyed it because like, you know, the shadows like move around the floor and your perception is dramatically increased. Like, well, just auditory wise, we're like walking on the street and we saw this, you know, motorcycle come up right next to us, right? And then it drives. And I don't know how long. It must have been miles, and we were still hearing it. Matter of fact, I was like, so like you see that tree over there? Like I'm walking this far behind, and my friend Johnny and Liam are over there. And I'm like just whispering, Liam. And he's like, the fuck was that? You know, like super like your perception, like. You don't realize how powerful our physical perceptions are, our sensations are. Like there was lights coming out of my periphery. Like I could swear I was seeing out the back of my skull. You know, like there's like a level of, what do you call the side of your periphery?
Peripheral.
So like your peripheral vision like increases. Like I don't know, like it was weird. I was like, I've never experienced like being able to see out of the corner of my eye, but like an extra 45-degree angle, you know what I mean? It's intense, man. And you could get easily disoriented. Like I don't recommend anybody, you know, do it unless you have somebody that's like sober. I mean, I don't recommend anybody do any drugs, period, just because I think that's like a journey for you to find on your own. But the way that those experiences have influenced my life is, I think, it's killed a lot of my ego. And I think ego is what makes you want to control things. It's what makes you want to be like, oh, I have to do it, you know, this way, and it's got to be perfectly executed. The more you eliminate your ego, yeah, you don't feel the need to like grip onto something. Because at the end of the day, man, like when you die, like and everything's fading, and you're going off into the heavenly or not so heavenly abyss, you're going by yourself, and you can't take everything with you. The only thing you can take is your memories. You know, your experiences. So I just try, like I think the way that drugs have influenced my life is to be open to possibility, to magic, to absurdity, because life is absurd. And yeah, to just be accepting, and going back to what I said, don't expect anything, because like you can, you know, walk in traffic, get hit by a car, or like, you know, start your car and it explodes, or you know what I mean, like a myriad of things can happen and it's over. And it's like there's no reason to be so caught up in like how it ought to be. But that shouldn't stop you from having a vision. That shouldn't stop you from pursuing something that you think is bigger than yourself, you know? Because otherwise, I mean, well, this is the thing though. Like a lot of people are like, well, what's the purpose of life, right? And there's this guy named Sadhguruji. He's like a Hindi yogi guy, and he says, well, the purpose of life is life itself, just to live it. And I think especially Americans, we idealize the concept of like having a dream and like going places, and maybe it's a little bit cliche of me, but like I have an American dream. I think I think my dream is to like fucking be a movie star, like at the end of the day, and like to influence people in a good, positive way that makes them want to pursue their dreams. Because for me, like to just live life, like I could go be a bum or a nomad or like an accountant, and it's like if it's not filled with a purpose that I've deemed worthy of my existence, then like why live life?
I feel like, is there, profound. Is there any last kind of thing that you'd like to say to the audience? Either some things that maybe you've discovered in this conversation that you'd like to share, or maybe some advice or something?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot more to be said, I think. I think the main thing is to just like decide what it is you want out of life. Because honestly, the sooner you do that, the less regrets you'll have. Like, I often look back and I think, this is cliche, and like a lot of people's parents probably say this to their kids. Like, oh, how I wish I could be your age so I could go through all of it again. You know what I mean? And like do it all a different way. Obviously, like, had you not gone through those experiences, you wouldn't have learned. Like, it would be great for everybody to go back in time travel, and like completely like rearrange the course of their lives based on the information they learned from living their life to begin with. But I mean, like, you just gotta like accept the losses and not have regrets about it. And I think, like I was saying, like the best way to not have regrets about something is to just be like, commit to something. Like, just go all out on one thing that you really love, or maybe several things. Commit to those things and see where you end up after like 3 months at least. And if you don't like where you're at after 3 months, then fucking change it. Find something new. But if you like where you're at after 3 months, like, go harder, go longer, go faster, go farther. Yeah, I think that's everything.
Well, it's just the tip of the iceberg, but it was a nice, a great part of it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. It was fun.
All right, everyone. That's it. That's it for now. Maybe 10 years later, there'll be another one.
Yeah, or 5.
Or 5. Actually, five would be fun too. I wonder how long that was.